standing near Jefferson Park due to an obstruction. Niles, there's crash on Milwaukee Avenue at Oakton. On 94 in Pleasant Prairie southbound at Highway ML. Police activity has the right lane blocked. Looking at the Kennedy inbound at Keeler, there's a stall in the left lane there, but traffic still moves nicely on the Kennedy both ways. No delays to report on the Edens or the Eisenhower. About Stevenson, it's congested Pulaski to Kedzie, 35 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive, outbound flight at 34. The Ryan, I-57, good inbound Mission Ford, little tide approaching the verge. Tollways are fine, northwest Indiana as well. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center. Cloudy and 38 today. We have 37 right now. Next news coming up at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
No, not you. Not you. Your organization's terrible.
On AM 560.
You are fake news.
The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and we've talked about the work of our next guest, Matt Taibbi, contributing editor for Rolling Stone, over many months now, because even though he is no fan of Trump, he's not self-identified as part of some media resistance either. He's actually done really good pieces asking a lot of important questions about the conduct of those in power, past and present, past including Jim Comey and John Brennan and Loretta Lynch and the Obama administration, the Mueller investigation, the Durham investigation. So doing what a journalist is supposed to do, I guess, question things that don't make sense or bump up statements that are in conflict with one another. He also is a podcaster. He co-hosts a podcast, Rolling Stone podcast, Useful Idiots. He recently had Michael Moore, the documentarian, on. And this was the exchange, Michael Moore offering his take on race in America.
I refuse to participate in post-racial America. I refuse to say because we elected Obama that suddenly that means everything's okay. White people have changed. White people have not changed. Two-thirds of all white guys voted for Trump. That means anytime you see 3 white guys walking at you down the street toward you, 2 of them voted for Trump. You need to move over to the other sidewalk because these are not good people that are walking towards you. You should be afraid of them.
And the third one probably says, I'm thinking about voting for Trump. Right?
Yeah, the third one is you and me.
Yeah. Right.
We're traitors. We're traitors to our race. That's how they see us, too, by the way.
For more on all of the above, we're pleased to be joined by Matt Taibbi, contributing editor for Rolling Stone, podcaster at Useful Idiots, author of the book Hate, Inc., Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
Morning. I want to get to your reporting, but I just have to get your handle on what Michael Moore said on your podcast. I voted for Trump, but I don't think I don't think of like this at all, period. But I don't think white people who didn't are traitors to my race. The Michael Moores of the world, continuing with the theme of deplorables, they think they're helping themselves?
No, and look, I probably should have said something in that moment. But look, in the on the sort of left-siding media world, it's a trope. It's an inescapable trope that anybody who voted for Trump is a bad person. So when he went into that spiel about something that's factually true, which is that two of every 3 white men voted for Trump. And then he says that those are not good people. I was just kind of hoping that we would just move on to the next question as quickly as possible, but it blew up into a thing, and I understand why. But that's how people feel about Trump. People have very, very strong feelings about it. I've written a lot about how some of this has gotten out of hand to the point where people are not able to see issues for what they really are because they're so focused on Trump the individual. And yeah, you're right. I do think it's a continuation of that instinct that led to the deplorables comment, which which also was, I thought, counterproductive at the time and said so.
But he took it a step further and said, "But then you should cross the street," as if they're going to attack us or something. Come on. I mean, I know Michael Moore. I worked with him in Detroit at Fox 2, and you can confront him. He's not like some holier than thou person who you hold on a pedestal.
He must not have heard the Jussie Smollett thing was a hoax.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
He must not have heard that.
Because we're a MAGA country. But I mean, why do you regret that you didn't say something even about that, about the violence aspect of it?
I guess I have a little bit of a different approach towards interviewing. I think people, and I interview people from all across the spectrum. I think when they feel comfortable, they will sometimes reveal themselves a little bit more. So I'm not constantly interrupting and telling them, this or that. Well, that might have been an instance where I could have said something, but it is what it is.
No, I hear you.
I think.
I appreciated the interview because for exactly what you just said. People reveal who they are. That's fine. That's what Michael Moore thinks. It's ironic. I mean, Michael Moore is predicting Trump's going to win in 2020, sans some sort of exogenous event. And he's sort of blind to the fact that in part he may win re-election in 2020 because of the incendiary remarks of people like Michael Moore. But that's fine. I mean, I want people to tell me who they are, not posture to pretend they're something they're not. So I'm not taking you to task for it. I just wanted to review it with you. That's all.
No, I get it. I do get it. When Hillary Clinton said the deplorables thing at the time, I've written about this. It's interesting, the progression on this, because when she first said it, it was kind of the universal belief among journalists, even people who kind of work in the sphere of journalism that I do, that it was a huge unforced error, that you can't insult voters that way, that it's fair game to go after politicians, but once you start making huge generalizations about big blocks of voters, that's a politically losing thing to do, in addition to probably being wrong, morally on some level. But once Trump got elected, that went out the window, and not only did that become acceptable, but remember the original formulation was that I think only a half or a third of the voters were deplorables. And then it went to being all of them were.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I see that phenomenon. I don't personally go there. I don't think it's a wise thing to do. I also don't happen to believe it, but it's something that is a phenomenon in the press now.
You've written a couple of important pieces in Rolling Stone that I've referenced, and I want to go over them. But before we get to that, I just want this development with some documents that were released, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, FOIA request. They've got effectively what turn out to be transcripts of Andy McCabe, former deputy director and acting director of the FBI, Andy McCabe, basically admitting that he lied to the FBI, and
right.
And his "Yep, I did" it was basically his admission that he had told them something different in a first meeting than was true, and he copped to it in a second meeting. The other thing that's across the political spectrum here is watching people in charge of our law enforcement agencies and spy agencies with immense power seemingly above the law. For all the talk on both sides of politicians aren't above the law, the president is above the law, I think the question a lot of Americans' minds, and it used to be on the minds of the left too, are people in the fourth branch of government, particularly law enforcement and intelligence, are they above the law?
They absolutely are. And the thing that's been incredibly concerning to me in the last 3 years or so, and I've written a lot about this, is it's something that you just mentioned, which is that the preoccupation with abuses of power by intelligence and counterintelligence and law enforcement, that used to be a big concern of people who identify as politically left, and that has completely disappeared in the age of Trump. We routinely see incidents where law enforcement or intelligence or counterintelligence behaves badly, does inappropriate things, and people are completely disinterested in hearing about it on the other side of the aisle. And just to take an example, if Andy McCabe is lying to investigators how can you as a person, if you're going to go and say, oh, look at George Papadopoulos was convicted and, criminally convicted. And so are all these other defendants in the Trump sphere for lying to investigators. I mean, if you're going to get upset about the one thing, you have to get upset about the other. And it's worse when a law enforcement person does it, frankly. And I don't understand. I mean, I do understand why it's happened that way, but I think it's really not a positive thing at all.
You wrote a piece a few weeks back that we're in a permanent coup, and you go, which is something a lot of people on a lot of Trump supporters say too. You provide a lot of detail to support your contention, your perspective on why you're driving to that point, including sort of imagining what the reaction would have been if you had the heads of the spy agencies and law enforcement agencies accusing President Obama of having links to Al Qaeda and prosecuting a case against him in part surreptitiously, just to try to, I think, get in the minds of the left to say, would you like that? If you wouldn't like that, then you shouldn't like some of what's going on at present. And I wonder how you're received within media circles. You're a pretty high-profile media guy. As you said, you're sort of center-left. And writing pieces like that, number one, getting it published in Rolling Stone. Number two, how you're received by your colleagues when you write pieces like this.
Well, I've been kind of the kid with lice for 3 years now, because I had questions about the Russia thing from the start. I lived in Russia for a long time, for over a decade, and I speak Russian, and the story never made any sense to me at all. It similar to 9/11 truth, it would have been an extremely elaborate conspiracy to pull off, and it's not in the style of either Donald Trump or the Russians, frankly. But that wasn't so much the big thing. The big thing was episodes like the one you just referenced, where I was looking at in January 2017 when James Comey and John Brennan and Jim Clapper and Mike Rogers, they presented the incoming president with the Steele dossier, and basically with the idea that they were going to make him aware of blackmail material, and they promised to keep it close. And then within like 10 seconds, it was leaked to all the news agencies so that everybody could write about basically the P tape. I mean, that was what happened there. And that's no matter how you look at it, that's an act of insubordination by the top spy agencies against the president, and it certainly doesn't make the president look good or the United States look good. If it were anybody else, people would be completely freaking out about that moment. And of course, it continued from there for 3 more years of leaks after that. And I just don't understand the lack of concern about the institutional response there. It seems to me a big story, but it's something nobody wants to talk about.
And the lack of accountability too. If you turn out to have been wrong on something, it's fine. Everybody's wrong on things, so just own it. But there's no owning it. There's just sort of glossing over it. This other piece that you wrote, 5 questions that remain after the release of the Horowitz report. I mean, you just pull from the report, basically just bumping up statements that, for example, Comey and McCabe made that contradict a statement that John Brennan made. You pull statements that Loretta Lynch made that contradict a statement that Comey made. Why are you one of the few who actually wants those contradictions explained?
Well, when the Horowitz report came out, the only headline that anybody wanted to take from it was the one about bias. So as soon as they had a headline that they could extract from it, which said that the start of the investigation, met the minimal requirements of an authorized investigation, and there was a line in there about a lack of bias at the beginning. And that was, nobody wanted to dig any more deeply than that, except it's a 416-page report, and there's a lot in there, and it's manifestly obvious if you read it that Horowitz, who I don't think is any flaming conservative or anything like that, but he was deeply, deeply troubled about what he was finding. And yeah, there are contradictory statements between the FBI, the CIA, and the Justice Department about how the investigation began. And more to the point for reporters, there's all sorts of information in there to suggest that lots and lots of news stories we wrote, particularly those that are sourced to Christopher Steele, were wrong, were fake. And there hasn't been any appetite for going back and saying, yeah, gee, we messed that up. Also the Nunes memo, the Devin Nunes memo, which was universally panned, and there's no way to look at it now and not say that it was basically accurate throughout. And I think even if you're, not a fan of Devin Nunes politically, you got to own up to that, don't you? I just don't understand that either.
Well, and I wonder if there's any, if there's some pangs of remorse or conscience, at least in some quarters. And to that, I point out, I try to look for green shoots here. Eric Wemple, a media critic over at Washington Post, did this 5-part report on the Steele dossier and the reporting of it. And in his final installment, I mean, he really took Rachel Maddow to task over her reporting. Mm-hmm. And I respect him for doing that because I know he's no Trump fan either. Fine, you don't have to be a Trump fan. And I just wonder, does that indicate anything to you of a desire to examine perhaps how the D.C. press corps has largely conducted itself over the last 3 years, or is that just a one-off?
I think it's certainly an indicator because not only did he do it, he had to get somebody to okay it. Right. So that suggests that the ice might be melting a little bit. Some of the same things happened when the WMD mess took place. There was a period there when it was becoming clear that there weren't going to be any WMDs, and a lot of reporters began kind of looking sideways at each other and saying, this doesn't look good for us. But it took, years for it to really become mainstream that a mistake had been made. And even then, there weren't really any consequences. It wasn't like the people who really screwed up, except for a couple of big examples, got in trouble. But, I think the lesson there is that it does take this business an awfully long time to admit mistakes, and it's hard for them to do it when it's mixed up with the question of whether or not Donald Trump is going to win re-election for a lot of reporters. I think they think that if they admit that, it's going to be giving him political capital, and they don't want to do that, and so they won't. And to me, I just don't think that's a legitimate reason not to own up to it, because your readers certainly see that, and in that meantime, they're not going to have as much confidence in you.
He is Matt Taibbi, contributing editor for Rolling Stone, podcaster, Useful Idiots is the podcast, and the author of the book Hate Inc., Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Dan, Amy, thank you very much. Take care now.
Yeah, thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Keith Peters in for Lou Dobbs, who returns on Monday. Vanguard eliminates commissions from online trading. Amazon workers say their jobs are threatened. Those stories next.
Are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates? Posting your job in one place isn't enough to find quality candidates. If you want to find the perfect hire, you need to post your job on all the top job sites. And now you can. With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites, including social media networks like Facebook and Twitter, all with a single click. Find candidates in any city or industry nationwide. Just post once and watch your